The highway stretched out before him, a ribbon of black ink against the gray canvas of the pre-dawn sky. Miles blurred into more miles as Frank, weary-eyed and aching, gripped the steering wheel of his rig. The only sound was the low hum of the engine and the occasional whine of the wind whistling through the gaps in the cab. He reached for the radio dial, hoping to find some company in the form of a late-night DJ or an Insomniac's playlist. He spun the dial, sifting through static and snippets of music. Just as fatigue began to claim him, a voice, clear and resonant, pierced the silence. "You alone?" "Not for long." Frank's brow furrowed. He hadn't seen a station on this frequency before. The voice, smooth as velvet and laced with an unsettling echo, continued. "You're listening to 101.3, The Whispering Wire. Stay tuned. We have stories to tell." Intrigued and in desperate need of something to keep him awake, Frank settled back into his seat. He glanced at the clock on the dash. 3 a.m. Strange time to start a broadcast, he thought. But there was a compelling quality to the voice that kept him listening. It spoke of loneliness, of secrets shared in the dead of night. It felt familiar, yet unsettlingly unknown. This was the start, he would realize, of a descent into a realm far stranger and more terrifying than he could have ever imagined. The first story was a simple one, a local legend Frank vaguely recalled hearing as a child. A vanishing hitchhiker on a lonely stretch of highway, a tale as old as the roads themselves. But the voice, with its measured cadence and haunting tone, breathed new life into the familiar. It painted vivid pictures in Frank's mind, filling the silence of the cab with the imagined rustle of the hitchhiker's coat, the phantom chill of a sudden cold spot. As the story ended, Frank found himself oddly disturbed. He tried to shake it off, attributing his unease to the late hour and the isolation of the road. He considered switching the station, seeking out something more cheerful, something to break the spell. But he found himself frozen, finger hovering over the dial, unable to tear himself away. The voice returned, silkier and more insidious than before. Fascinating, isn't it? How the past lingers, how it clings to us, even when we try to outrun it. Frank's pulse quickened. The words seemed to claw their way out of the speaker, wrapping around him like tendrils of smoke. He glanced at the clock again, 3:15 a.m. The hands seemed to be moving faster, the minutes ticking by with an unnatural haste. He felt a chill crawl up his spine, despite the warmth of his jacket. The second story began. This time, it was about a stolen locket, an heirloom passed down through generations, its disappearance leaving a family fractured and broken. The details were vivid, the emotions raw. Frank listened, captivated and increasingly uneasy as the story unfolded. The voice on the radio seemed to weave a tapestry of guilt, regret, and long-buried secrets. And then it struck him. The stolen locket, the family heirloom. He knew the story. It wasn't just a story, it was a memory. A long-forgotten memory, buried deep within the recesses of his mind, resurfaced with startling clarity. He saw himself, a young boy, clutching a tarnished silver locket in his hand. He remembered his mother's tearful pleas, her desperate search for the missing heirloom. He remembered the weight of guilt he carried, the shame he thought he had successfully buried. How could this voice, this stranger on the radio, possibly know about this? The locket, the guilt, the long-forgotten transgression of his youth. These were secrets he had kept hidden for years, even from himself. Panic began to claw at the edges of his composure. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white, as the voice on the radio continued to weave its unsettling narrative. The cab felt smaller now, suffocating, the air thick with something more than just the stale scent of coffee and engine grease. The third story sent a jolt of pure terror through him. The voice, now a low murmur, spoke of a betrayal, a promise broken, a friendship shattered beyond repair. It described a specific instance, a childhood prank gone wrong, an act of cruelty that had haunted Frank for years. He remembered that day with agonizing clarity, the old abandoned well at the edge of town, the dare, the fear in his friend's eyes as he stood too close to the edge, the sickening crunch of bone and the splash that followed, the panic, the guilt, the awful, crushing weight of his silence. These were memories he had tried to outrun, secrets he had hoped to take to the grave. Yet, here they were, laid bare by the voice on the radio, broadcast into the darkness of his truck cab as if the specters of his past had found a voice. The clock read 3:30 a.m. The air grew colder, the silence between the stories now heavy with unspoken threats. Fear, primal and consuming, tightened its grip on Frank's chest. He felt a desperate urge to turn the radio off, to silence the voice that seemed to be peeling back layers of his life with each passing story. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. He was trapped, both by the terror that held him captive and a growing, morbid curiosity about what secret, what buried memory, the voice would unearth next.